start in 2 minutes. Kathy is alive and is here. So, applause. Thank you for the traffic. It's going to be long. In 2 minutes, we're going to start.
Okay. Hello. Hi. Hello, everyone. Sorry, just wait. Welcome to the Outside of the Box presentation. Thanks for all of your patience. Things are a little slower this morning. My name is Veronica Simmons, and I'm a radio producer and media artist from Toronto via Halifax. And I wanted to tell you about this weird, bizarre little radio project that I started at the community radio station in Halifax called CKDU. Yeah, so it's a show where I braid hair on the radio. And I'll sort of get to telling you how that came to be. But first I want to tell you about sort of how I got involved with community radio in general. I'm just going to stop leaning and start standing. Yeah, so the first radio show I ever had on CKDU was an odd show. I had studied linguistics at university and had actually never really been involved with the radio, but sort of discovered it after I graduated and knew that I wanted to get involved but didn't really know how. And then there was one programmer at the station who was going on vacation for 5 weeks, and he sent me an email and was like, I know you're interested. Do you want to take over my slot for 5 weeks? And I thought, wow, that's perfect, because there's 5 vowels. So I'll just do a vowel show, and for each letter that is a vowel, I will just explore that letter and anything starting with that letter. So I did talked about amalgamation, and I talked about aardvarks, and played weird ambulance sounds, and it was like a living encyclopedia for each weird episode. And mostly what I realized is that I could just get so weird on the radio at this community radio station and just explore my weird curiosities, and I was allowed to, and I could be on the mic and I could say whatever I wanted, and it was heaven. So had my first taste of the dream of community radio. And then I actually also work as at the time I was working as a print reporter. I was working as the arts reporter for the local indie paper. And so in my capacity as a writer, I was invited to go to this art residency that happens on the Bay of Fundy in this beautiful farm. It's called the White Rabbit Residency. And at this residency, they have this greenhouse that you can see, which they've turned into a pirate radio station. And so as all of the artists are in the farm and the fields, they mostly do sort of site-specific art projects, and then they all have their little radio. So anyone who's in the radio station can be speaking to the artist, and it's this small little local pirate arty radio, which is quite magical. And so while I was there late one night, I just sort of sat down at the radio with a friend of mine and started gabbing and chatting and started slowly braiding her hair. And then the pun came to me of, oh, I'm braiding hair on the air. It's not radio, it's bradio. And then once the pun happened, it was a bit of a hit in my head because I have this weird linguistics background. I was like, what a cute word. And then it was a bit of a hit. It turns out that I'm a really good braider. Yeah, my mom always braided my hair as a child, and then I taught myself, and I'm quite adept at it. And so people started lining up outside of this little house, wanting to get on the radio and get braided, and I realized I had a bit of a hit on my hands. So when I got back to Halifax, I pitched it to CKDU, and they let me do this on the air. And I had a bi-weekly show where I would invite artists and musicians and children and pretty much anyone coming through town that had hair. And they would sit down and have a mic, and then I had a sort of standing mic. And what you can't see here is that I'm also working the board, playing music, playing the carts, multitasking like you've never seen. And it was just a total hoot and just really weird. We would talk about anything, and the conversation would usually center around hair and people's relationships with their hair, which is really rich territory, as you must know, as people who have or don't have hair. It's a relationship, lots to say. But then I would also talk a lot about braiding and the structure of a braid and what does a braid mean. So I just wanted to play you a clip of these early days and some of the weird conversations that I was having. Here's a little taste.
Can I get a braid, B?
Sit on down. You have arrived in Radio Town, where we get down. Hair first, follicle first.
Hey, I had an idea on the way over here.
Talk to me.
It's pretty conceptual. I was biking
Uh-huh.
through the rain, and I had this idea that you might want to participate in with me.
I'm so curious.
So I was biking, and then I knew that I was coming here, and then I pictured what would it be like to braid our bikes.
Whoa, braid our bikes.
Like
Wait,
a
so taking 3 bikes and braiding them together into a super bike?
No, like we would bike, but we would bike the pattern of a braid. Like we do a braid formation while biking.
Yes, I love this idea. I love this idea because I like thinking about braiding the world. So I like the idea of braiding nature together, like braiding some trees together, braiding grasses together. But I mean, why can't we braid our actions in the world? Maybe we should just live in threes, unifying.
Polyamory.
But I also love polybikery. I think that's a beautiful vision. Where do you see that happening? Where do we braid our bikes?
I was picturing on that German highway.
What? I don't even know where that is.
The Autobahn, that's where I was
Okay, should we braid our airplanes on the way over there?
I would like you to braid an airplane onto my head if possible.
Ooh, okay. A jetliner from ear to ear, or from
Or maybe we
neck
can
to...
just go with the theme of like flight. Like if my braid could have a bit of lift to it.
Lift to it. Okay, so we want a bit of a flip?
Yeah, like Pippi Longstocking. Like maybe we need a piece of metal.
More like
though.
Flippy Longstocking.
Let's try it.
All right.
Can they hear us?
So that's a little taste. Yeah, so the conversation is just wandering all around. And then as you sort of heard, a sort of theme arose that she wanted to have a bit of an airplane on her head. So then I would sort of go ahead and braid her something that looked kind of like an airplane, and we talk about it. Yeah, so that was sort of the original framing of it. I also eventually realized that it probably wasn't really easy to try to have music going at the same time. It got a little tricky. But that's sort of what was happening. I have a little video where you can sort of see a little bit visually of what was involved, because I know it's an interesting problem, because radio, as you know, is this audio. You don't get the visuals, and braiding is a very visual, strong art form. And so I talk about that a little bit in this little video. There was a journalism student that came to visit me and made a little video of bradio, so I'll share it with you. My name is Veronica Simmons, and I'm a radio producer and braider. And today I'm going to be doing my show, which is called Bradio, where I braid hair live on air. What kind of braid are you thinking? Do you want everybody all in, all the hair's gone? You want a little half up, half down? I love braiding hair. I love being on the radio. I know that the radio is this ethereal medium. You can't really see what's happening. But as you'll see when I'm doing bradio, I'm actively describing each braid as I do it. And I hope the people listening in their cars can follow along. What's really great about the show is that it starts with braiding, but then something else can sort of come out of it.
My hair always lasts for 3 days, and I'm very excited about it lasting.
We're into sustainability here. This is sustainable. This is sustainable braiding. I think I'm always trying to get people to get a little crazier with bradio. With this new season, I want people to bring in things that I can braid other than hair. I want to be braiding weird objects, and I've been braiding bread, and I want to braid meat. I've been talking to a butcher about cutting me a cut of meat that would have 3 pieces that I could braid. I want to braid and braise meat. That's something I'm into. But yeah, I feel like no one even knows how crazy bradio can get. I feel like we're just starting. So it's an odd thing, and so I went on to braid many, many people over the 2 years that I was doing this show. I had scientists come in. I actually braided some babies at one point. And what I really discovered with this odd project is that braiding became this really wonderful interviewing tool because, first of all, your interviewing subject can't run away because you have them in your hands. And there's also something about interviewing somebody when they're not looking at you. Like it's almost this sort of like Freudian couch analysis thing. So they're thinking about their hair and their relationship to their hair, and they're reflecting back on their life and their childhood. And there were some really wonderful moments that happened on the show. Like there was this one woman who was talking about how her father had been in charge of braiding her hair, and she described how he would braid her hair with the same vigor that he would tie her hockey skate laces. And it was just like little gems like that I've been holding on to. And yeah, just really adorable moments came out. I want to play a little song that was sung on radio one time that I loved.
I need some braids like I never needed braids before. Gonna braid some hair onto ya. Had a little braid, now I'm back for more. Gonna braid some hair onto ya.
Set your hairs free. It's the only way to be. Anyway, so all of this is just like my ode to community radio a little bit, because I feel like no commercial station, I don't believe, would have let me be this weird on the radio. And since doing this show, I've gone on to make more legitimate radio. I've produced pieces for the CBC and the ABC and the BBC and all the C's. But this is like my passion project. This is my heart, and this is where it came from. And it was always something that I just did for fun. And I feel like it's really important to do things just for fun and not for money sometimes. And that's where we experiment, and that's where we have fun. But yeah, since that time, I've been trying to make documentaries about hair now that are like a little bit more produced than just sitting around and braiding people. So I thought I'd share with you this little montage-y documentary that I made for this competition for the Third Coast Audio Festival. And it was just, the challenge was to make a really short documentary. And I made it about haircuts, because I feel like everyone has a relationship to their hair. So I thought I'd just share this little one with you.
Listen, I had a lot of hair troubles. Like,
there was like this long strip of hair in the middle of my head, and it was sort of like hot pink with like some orange splotches.
This texture of like something bad had happened to it.
And I hated it.
If you looked at me from behind, you'd think I was a girl.
Like, it was just like this big, like, puff ball.
I did like having long hair, but I don't know, it was just harder to eat ice cream and to sleep.
I had like gone to an art exhibit the night before, and I noticed all of these beautiful women with really short hair. And I was like, they look so great with short hair.
I started to feel like it was heavy and it was somehow weighing me down.
I felt like I need a new look. And then I kind of just went, yep, you know what, screw it, I'm cutting my hair.
So my aunt was a hairdresser.
And I called her. I was like, hey, Carmen, will you shave my head?
And I could tell she was really hesitant about it. She was like, what is your boyfriend gonna think?
I woke up and I'm just like, I'm ready to do this.
We listened to music, we drank kava.
First, she put my hair in a big ponytail and like cut off like 3/4 of it, and oh my god, it looked like this weird animal.
And I could tell it was getting short. I was like, Auntie, it's getting really short. She's like, oh, you have so many split ends. We have to get rid of the split ends.
And then suddenly, like, the battery, I guess, got a new burst of life, and it kicked in, and I had turned it up to the highest setting. And so instead of some nice stubble, I just shaved myself completely bald.
If soccer mom hair and Midwestern news anchor hair had a baby, like that's what they gave 17-year-old me.
And then what happened?
Well, nobody really noticed at first.
I just looked really, really different. And I met up with my boyfriend afterwards, and he was just like, he just kept looking at me like, oh my goodness, wow. And he was so into it. And almost immediately from like when we saw each other, it was like a whole different relationship.
And I cried and I cried and I cried, and like my friends tried to fix it, and there was literally nothing to be done. I just had to like put a hat on.
Everyone in my class went, at first they're just like, oh sorry, I think you have the wrong classroom. And they're just like, oh my god, it's Kai, whoa.
It's almost like I looked like a badass bitch, and so I kind of felt like I was one, and then I started acting like one.
Just sucked. Straight up character building. I don't know, like...
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to play that just to show that this weird hair project that started in this little greenhouse is now, it's been sort of feeding my fire for a while now, and it's taking me to all different kinds of places, both in the audio place and actually in the physical world. So I now, sometimes I take Bradio on the road. I've been taking Bradio to festivals, different radio festivals, where I'll sort of set up my Bradio stand and invite people to come in and just sit down, and I braid them and I record our conversations. And I now have this giant archive of all of these hairy conversations. And then just this summer, I was actually the artist in residence at the Children's Museum in Pittsburgh, which was an incredible experience, where I actually ended up braiding 130 people in like a 10-day period. It was bananas. And a lot of those people were children. And so what I did was I got these two amazing salon chairs, and I set one up as the recording chair, where I'd invite kids to come and sit and chat as I braided them. And then with those recordings, I then cut up a little montage similar kind of to what you just heard. And then I put that montage inside of the hair dryer there so that the kids could sit down and hear what they were talking about. And so I'll just play for you now what was inside of that chair so that you know what they got.
Radio, 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 cute, brown, sexy, cool, awesome, perfect. It's short. It is brownish blonde. Blondish that has some red in it. Curly, braided straight down. In a afro. It's a little bit wet. I got it cut yesterday. It was getting too long, and me and my mom just had to cut it because they were like split ends. Like last week, I got my hair cut. It grew super fast. We cut it up to my shoulder, and then I wanted it long, so I never wanted to cut it again. Sometimes my stepmom, like, she doesn't curl my hair, but she straightens my hair with a flat iron.
I used to wear headbands every single day.
Barrettes and volleys. Every time I brush my hair, I always go down here, and then I don't feel the hair part. I really need my hair back in a ponytail, quick. I need my hair combed. My stepmom's curling iron is not good for my hair. Oh, I can braid her hair. And I like my hair. Radio, radio, radio.
So that was the cutest thing that I got to do ever. Yeah, so I guess like the point of all of this is really that I think we can all get a lot weirder on the radio. And I feel like the beauty of community radio and community media is that it is this open invitation that we have to get on the air and follow our hearts and our heads wherever they want us to go. And I'm totally the person that tries to convince everyone to get a show on the radio so they can get weirder on it. And radio now, I've left Halifax and I'm now away from my CKDU station that supported this project for so long. And I'm still sending them episodes as I produce them, but I'm mostly making a podcast version now. And it's a different beast. It's a different feeling. There was some real magic to the fact that this was a live show, that it was live on air. Because now that I'm making a podcast version, I'm way more conscious of editing and cleaning it up and making it so tight and beautiful. But there was something about that mess, that hot live mess, that really made this thing what it is today. So I think that's sort of all I have to say about it. Thanks for listening. Maybe I'll braid you all later. Okay, sure. Cool. Anyone have any questions? Yeah. Well, this is the thing. So you, for instance, sir, I can see that I could braid your beard, for instance. Like I've been braiding some beards, and even like there's certain people that already have styles in their hair. Like when I was in Pittsburgh, I was braiding some people who had, like dreadlocks or something, or they had their hair already set up. So then we would just sort of have a conversation about their relationship with their hair, or maybe then sometimes they would braid me instead. So it's a flexible show. And I invite people to bring in things other than hair to be braided as well. So any other questions right away? No? It's interesting because I feel what I like about this show is the intimacy of it and inviting people to have sort of like a quiet, calm moment with themselves. And I'm talking. There's this one neurologist that I want to speak to that talks about like the psychophysiology of having your head touched. I think that like there's something about that kind of touch and that kind of intimacy that just makes you feel good. And I feel like that kind of self-care and self-reflection is good for all of your work. Like if you go on in your day, I think that those little intimate moments do shape change in society. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but that's sort of something I believe in. Yeah.
Can you sell this show? Are people interested by this show? Do you have feedbacks? How many people listen to your show? So we say experimental. Sometimes we say experimentals. Do we want to be well listened, or do we want to be listened by a lot of people? You think your show is well listened or listened by a lot of people?
That's a really excellent question. I don't know if you know, Dan Meisner is a producer at Spark at CBC, and he said something excellent once, which was that he'd rather be vital than viral. And I think I believe that as well. Like I would rather have a dedicated audience that actually cares and listens and engages than to have millions of people who are like maybe half listening or just in it for the pun. So yeah, I right now I feel like I just started putting out the podcast version recently, and I get about like 200 listens for each one. But I'm actually in conversation with a podcast network who wants to sign me on, and that would mean advertising money and a bigger audience. So that's something that I think I'm going to be doing, which is really excellent. So that's more ears.
Are you convinced that podcast is a way that we should use? Personally, I think there's too much effort for someone to do podcasts. You know, they got to go on your podcast, click on it, download it, compared to when you're on air, like a live radio. They just turn the radio on and they eat what you give them, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think the podcast is the future of radio?
I mean, like, there's a lot of people who will really proselytize and be like, podcasting is the future. I am a dedicated podcast listener, but I'm also a lover of terrestrial radio. And so I feel like these don't have to be two separate loves. I think that they can both exist and both have a place. And this show, like as I was saying, it was really important for me that it was terrestrial and that people did just stumble upon it, because it was a weird, wacky thing to stumble upon. But I think the thing about podcast listeners is that they are the most dedicated listeners. Because as we know, or like if there's radio people, it is really just the most intimate of mediums. It really feels like one person is speaking directly to you. And once you create that relationship, then they will seek you out and they will find you every week. But it is about getting people to even know you exist. I feel like that's the harder thing. And so things like podcast networks and social media, help to spread the word. But yeah, I think I would like to see a future where there's podcasting and terrestrial radio. And I think they both have a place. Any other questions? Just a stretch? Oh, maybe a question.
It's a great project. I'm really happy to hear about it.
Oh, great.
You spent quite a bit of time talking about it as sort of odd or offbeat, and I'm wondering if it's important for you that people think of it as weird, because I actually think it's pretty normal. Like it's two people talking, one of them's braiding the other's hair. Like it doesn't seem like a particularly challenging or menacing or like it seems like it would be like super easy to listen to by like thousands and thousands of people, like it seems like a perfectly accessible format.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering why you like to couch it in terms of experimentalness.
Huh. Thanks for that. I think that's a really interesting point. I think that the part about it that I've always thought of as weird is just that I feel like we don't usually do tactile stuff with the people that we interview. Like I feel like we don't usually touch each other, is something. But yeah, like I feel like the actual audio of it doesn't sound that weird. It's like, these are people talking to each other. But I feel like the part that is the twist is that you're hearing these people talking to each other, and then I'm hoping that you're using your imagination to think about how physically intimate we are at that moment. Like sometimes I'm like crawling over someone's head, or like sometimes people have like sat in my lap so that I can like get to the under hairs or something like that. And that's part of my challenge, is trying to be better at describing some of that intimacy and how that's happening. But yeah, I'm not married to it. Like, if you don't think, I don't know, it doesn't have to be weird. It's just the thing that I'm doing. But yeah, I don't know why I always use that language. Maybe because people tell me it's weird. Yeah. Well, it's unusual, and then it's interesting. Like some people want to come on because they want a braid, and other people want to talk, and then there's some people that want to talk and be braided. And those are the best people. Yeah, but you guys should talk now. I feel like I'm taking up all this time. Thank you so much, everybody, and I'll be around if you want to chat more after.
No, it's only here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hello and good morning, everybody. Okay. Take the mic. A lot of technical stuff to take. Okay. So my name is Barbara Eppensteiner, and I came all the way from Vienna. Glad to be here. Heard a lot of interesting things till now, like your braiding thing very much. I'm here because Cassie visited us some years ago, and she thought what we're doing is kind of out of the box. The things I've heard now, I'm not so convinced about it, but I will tell you. I'm representing a television station in Vienna, which is rather a young one. We exist since 10 years. And maybe in order to explain how we became Octo, and it's probably important to explain, to talk a little bit about the specific Austrian media situation. But before I do this, I maybe want to show you what Octo is.
Okto ist der seriöseste Sender, den wo gibt auf Erden.
Okto je naša televizija.
Okto ist der einzige Sender, der Wien zeigt, so wie Wien.
Why don't I have any video?
Wien ist nämlich wahnsinnig bunt und laut. Okto.
Yeah, there it should be with English subtitles. No, it's
Okto ist der seriöseste Sender.
Okay, sorry. So I can, everybody who's interested, I can show it on my laptop afterwards. That was just many of our producers. That's what we call the participants or volunteers, or all the words that I used for that here. Said about what the station means to them, because we 3 years ago we started doing little portraits of the people of our producers, produced in a very high quality with HD and a lot of cameras and sliders and everything. So people had something to show to others, and we also had possible to show the people behind the shows we are airing. Yeah, pity is that I can't show you that. Okay. Yeah, the situation was the following. Austria had a broadcasting monopoly for the public broadcaster, which lasted very, very long until 1993. So we were in Europe. It was only Albania and Austria who had this monopoly that long. It meant that only the ORF had permission to broadcast radio and television programs. There were, of course, some radio pirates who tried to do free radio, and there were always many art projects, video projects that tried to give also other people the voice and to make them heard. And they were traveling around with buses around the country and produced shows with people and showed them on the marketplaces or places like that. But we had no possibility to broadcast. And then beginning from the mid-80s, there was cable television, so there was not really a monopoly, but there was a lot of shows and private commercial stations coming in from Germany. So the ORF, who gets his financing partly from fees and partly from advertising, got rather commercial, and they stopped many of the art programs and all the rather experimental stuff, and got rather commercial. So when we started, then in 1990, when was it? No, in 1998, the monopoly fell, and private commercial radio and also free radio started in Austria. And when we started broadcasting in our project at the beginning of 2005, and then we started broadcasting at the end of 2005, so we're celebrating our 10th anniversary on Saturday. That's why I have to go back tomorrow. The situation was as follows. There was not even one non-commercial television station around the whole country. The ORF, as I said, with this twofold financing structure, received fees, but also did advertising and became rather commercial. The private commercial providers, meanwhile, all belonged to big German companies. They had their pioneering phase behind them and weren't experimenting anymore as well. And that was an advantage for us, because there was a lot of stuff that you couldn't see. And we had also the advantage that in our neighboring country, in Germany, there had been the so-called open channels for many years. And they got in a big crisis because their original concept went back to the 80s, and they had clearly underestimated the internet as a place where everybody could express his or her opinion. And they were convinced that it's important to have many participants, many people producing shows, and that it's not important to care about if anybody looks or listens to the programs, which is, I think, is really a strange way to think about it. Because if I say, I give you the possibility to get seen or heard with your opinions or your things you have to say, then I have the duty to make that happen. And then there was Radio Orange, this station I mentioned before, a chronicle underfinanced but very lively community radio that concerned itself with representing societal diversity, because that's also something that's really different in Austria. the public broadcasters, they didn't represent diversity at all, and they didn't even think about it. That, of course, changed because they saw what we did. And for that, it was also, when we started, the first program we aired was Africa TV, because we thought it's really important to show that, hey, there's other people. And that was the first time someone from Africa was on the screen at 8 o'clock in the evening. Didn't happen before. Yeah, so the society was already multicultural, but the media didn't represent it at all. We were also able to make use of an interesting groundwork in the field of arts, as I already told. So like maybe the Ars Electronica in Linz is known to some of you, because it's known also in other parts. And then there's this media workshop in Vienna where people that were going around with the bus, producing with workers, producing with other people. It was a very political project. And then a lively documentary film scene with a growing political sense. For us, it meant that it was quite easy to get artists interested, and that they were happy to have an opportunity to present their works to a wider public and to just experiment, like you told with your radio. There was a lot of ideas of people who just couldn't realize their ideas anywhere else, and so they came. Then the civil society saw OCTO as a new chance for the exchange of ideas and the platform of communication for ideas, political ideas, ideas concerning, don't get the word, Nachhaltigkeit. And then, of course, the society in all its diversity. Many immigrants that had until then no voice and possibility to publish on television, and they were also glad to have the opportunity. Meanwhile, we have about 15 different languages, which is a lot for such a small country of only 8 million people. At the same time, that was also, I also heard that mentioned yesterday, 10 years ago, the conversion to digital producing was already going on. So the means of production had not become only much cheaper, but also much more efficient and much easier to use. Consumer cameras were capable of producing quality sustainable for broadcast television. And there was also one other thing that was different to what happened in Germany. The legal situation allowed us to curate programs, because in Germany they also had the problem that they had to take everything. And they thought that it's the most democratic or fair way that you do all these programs in a line. So who comes first is first served, and then the next, the next, the next, the next. So what was shown on TV, you could never rely on what's coming next, and one show just destroyed the others, and the good shows were destroyed by the bad ones. So we really tried to curate and to make a programming that kind of, on one hand, led you from one show to the other, and on the other hand, also created interesting clashes. So then, for example, the ex-Yugoslavian community, then they come and say, "Oh, do you really have to air this queer show after hours?" And we said, "Yes, we have to, because we think it's nice if you also deal with these problems, and if you get to know what they're thinking about." So our concept was aimed at giving a voice to all the unheard people by enabling them to create their own shows. And yeah, I have also this way to broadcast here, but I fear. Okay, yeah. So it's non-profit, it's open for people who are willing to create programs on a regular basis. It's a place that's also very important for us. Okay. Okay, I've only 5 more minutes. But she didn't present at all, and we started half an hour later. So I think you have to give us another half an hour at least. Yeah. So I do it quick.
You've got an idea for your own TV show? This video will show you in 5 steps how to become a producer for Octo. The idea has been floating around in your head for a while now. What is your topic? Politics, civil society, urban arts, video art, entertainment, music, game culture. Just write it down. Now put together a team. Camera, sound, editing. In the concept, tell us what you need from Octo. Camera, editing suites, TV studio. Then send it to Octo, either by post or by email. As soon as we get your concept, we will make an appointment to talk to you personally. The professionals of Octo will discuss your concept with you, give you some tips on timing, arrangement of your show, and the ideal team size. Now you can start working. Becoming a professional requires training and know-how. You need to take the course Media and Copyright Law. That is super important. In other courses, you can learn how to work with the camera, how to record sound, how to use light, how digital editing works, how to work in the TV studio. By the way, you have to submit a written registration for all the courses. Time to start now. You've got your team, the equipment, and your concept. Now the shooting starts. Don't forget to take notes for editing at Octo's editing suite. Now the pilot is ready. Let's have a look. Everybody will put in one's 2 cents. Shorter, louder, longer, lighter. Professionals will help you improve your first work and avoid boredom. Then there's the usage agreement. You get a time slot. For example, every Wednesday on a monthly basis. That will be announced everywhere, online, in the newsletter, in the newspaper, by Facebook or Twitter. Now it is time for the premiere. On Octo, via live stream and on demand at Octothek. Now it's your turn.
Okay. So that's just one example of all the things we did to create something like a welcome culture to the people. And I mean, there's a lot to talk about writing here. Of course, if somebody comes and says, I want to do my show and I'm not really able to write a concept, we're gonna kind of do that together, of course. But still, I think that it's important to think about what I want to tell and how I can reach an audience. It can be in an experimental way, but I think you always have to think about that. If you go into the media, just what is my idea, what I want to do, but also how can I reach an audience? That has always been important. We have a lot of program promotion to get people know that we are here. There's a lot of many. We also have we had professional designers that created a corporate identity to just have something that makes the whole thing look at as one thing. All these very different programs in between. And we worked, which I like even more, is that we work together since 8 years with the university in Graz, which is another city in Austria, with the students, and the students create on-air designs for our shows, so that our shows really get professional on-air designs. And we do a lot of our own channels. We do press releases. We talk to journalists. We're on Facebook. We have a lot of cooperations in the field of, for example, film festivals, music festivals, other festivals where they can show their advertising on our channel, and then we are there with our advertisements and with our logo on there. So that also helps to create. To get people to know that you are there. But at last there is one factor that you can't plan so easily, because I think in the first few years we were simply a really cool crew there. And this was just attractive for people to come and work with us. The percentage of females was comparatively high. And most of the personnel had either an artistic background themselves or were at least very interested in arts. So that was a difference, because other stations I got to know were often managed by video technicians or media people coming from media education. And we never saw ourselves as the know-it-alls teaching others, but rather as partners who stood by side and wished to make programs that were just good and be looked at. And I'm sorry that I can't show you more. So maybe this. Okay. And once we had Amy Goodman in our studio.
It is part of a noble tradition all over the world of independent community television, giving voice to the majority of people. Because I really do think that those who are concerned about war and peace, those who are concerned about, the growing inequality between rich and poor, those who are concerned about racial, social, economic diversity, people who are concerned about climate change, the fate of the planet, are not a fringe minority, not even a silent majority, but the silenced majority, silenced by the corporate media, which is why we have to take it back. And Octo is a part of that, being there in community, covering the community, giving voice to the community, opening the microphones for people to speak for themselves.
So, thank you. Amy Goodman came to a festival in Austria, and then she did her show from our studio, and we asked her to do a testimonial. Yeah, was an awesome moment having her at the studio.
I have a couple of quick questions for you. In the video you showed first, you talked about that people coming with their ideas would take these 4 courses. Are those courses offered by Octo, and is there a cost for the people who are bringing their ideas to take those courses? And then, as a corollary to that, how is your funding structured to allow all that to happen?
Yeah, important questions. We are funded by the city of Vienna, mainly, and then there's some fundings from the state. But the main funding for the start was from the city of Vienna, and they always saw us as a project in the field of media education. So those courses were very important from the beginning, because it was also important for us that people do their shows themselves, that they don't just come and somebody else does the camera work, or somebody else does the lighting, or somebody else does the editing. We thought that it's really important that in this media surroundings we live, people get able to just produce their shows for themselves. Yeah. And yes, there's a little costs for the workshops. I mean, it's about ticket for the movies. It's 10 euros for one 3.5 euro for a workshop that takes 3.5 hours. And it's necessary because if you don't charge anything, you never know if anybody comes. And now we're rethinking a little bit this concept because there's also people coming from other stations to our workshops, and we want to have a different prices for people who really do their shows then, and for others just coming there and having cheap workshops. Okay, I think we're really don't have a lot of time, and I'm very interested about what's coming up now, so thank you.
Let's see what happens. Oh yeah, I'd like to not have to hold it. Okay, so that was the title of this presentation section, and I was thinking that when I was looking at that, I was like, oh yeah, I think I'm actually really out of the box here. I'm like somewhere from outer space in terms of some of the stuff I'll show you. I'm from Vancouver. My name is Julie Gendron. I work independently under Desiring Productions, which is a company that I have. Well, it's just me pretty much, except when I bring on a few other people. I also work closely with an artist run center there called Vivo Media Arts. And what I'm going to talk about is content through interaction design, because that's where I think about how content and programming happens. So I'm very much on the technical side of things. So my background, I have 20 years of online experience. I started as a graphic designer and became a project manager, was working in the corporate world during the .com years before it all crashed. It was soul-sucking pretty much, and I saw a really good documentary called Furry for the Sound, which was done purely like with the first DV video cameras, and it was really bad like a production because that's all it was. And it was basically about saving Clayoquot Sound, which was on Vancouver Island, and it was about a bunch of women that were getting together to save this area that was a forested, old growth forest area. And that really changed my mind about how community media happens and getting away from this corporate background. So I started thinking about how to tell stories through the internet, doing internet documentaries. So my interest is in creating platforms, experiences, and events that allow people to explore and create their own point of view, culture, and communities. And I do that very much in many different ways. So I was thinking about the box and what does that mean, and how it refers to what the work that I do. And I find, well, the box is basically one-sided technology, such as TV, so it just talks to you. It's on a schedule, there's linear storytelling, and the content is created generally by a team and delivered. So in terms of being out of the box, what I do is I look at interaction design and I look at how the audience can interact. And I facilitate that in some way. So you'll see in many ways when I'll show you. So interaction design, just because it may be unfamiliar to some, is the practice of designing interactive products, environments, systems, and services in which we interact with. Sounds pretty easy. And we focus on the behavior of people, and it involves understanding the sociology, psychology, history, learned behavior, and abilities of people. And satisfies the needs of desires of the user. So that's all very heady. It's all very up in the air. So I'll show you some examples of what I mean. I'm going to kind of talk through the different ways that I do this. I'm starting with a big project that I'm working on right now. I'm talking about specifically about dissemination at this point of view. There's this project that I'm working on. It's called vukavu.com. It's I am the product designer of it, and so in terms of interaction design and how I work with it, I look at the content which I'll show you in a moment, that's on this site, and I figure out how people are going to access it. So in terms of what Vukavu is you're going to see it. It's going to be released in the spring of next year. It's basically it's a dissemination platform, distribution platform for independent art and video that's being produced across this country for at least 40 years. So this includes documentary. It's all funded by the Canada Council for the Arts. The Canada Council gave $1.5 million to help distributors that they currently fund already. They fund them to distribute work by independent documentary filmmakers, independent artists, a lot of art, and it's a lot of work by people for the last 40 years that have been doing really raw work about what's happening, women's issues, Indigenous issues, gay rights, and whatnot. And so this project, and it's also very much, the work can be very serious documentary, linear documentary, and it can also be extremely experimental. But this stuff is all hidden in the vaults of Canada. All this history and all of the current artwork is shown in art houses and whatnot. And the public has never really been able to see it, and it's been a limited distribution. So the Canada Council decided to give these distributors across Canada $1.5 million to put this up on a platform which is much like Netflix. So in terms of how this works in interaction design and how it's kind of out of the box, and I'll show you. We are organizing it so that, this is the actual website, which you can't see officially right now. You can go to vukavu.com and sign up. But the way that it's out of the box is that there's two parts to this platform. The first part is this public-facing Netflix-looking thing where you can sign up and you can pay. We pay the artists at least 70 to 80% of what gets sold on here. So that's also out of the box because it's something that it doesn't happen all the time for artists that create stuff. They usually get 50% or lower. But there's two parts to this. So there's the front-facing part where you as an audience member can go in and look and buy and watch. But there's a back part of this too that looks very similar, and it's created by it's where curators can go and programmers can go and they can buy the high resolution versions of this. And so in terms of like some curatorial thing that's out of the box for this and how we are curating how these things go together, we are getting the curators that go back there and create lists of things that they find that are interesting. And we're allowing them to curate and then publishing it to the front of this website, which is really unique for a Canadian platform. Also because we don't really, we're a bit behind in terms of promoting curators and that work in Canadian independent art. That was a bit of a whirlwind, but so I'll move on. And if you have more questions for me, just let me know. I have cards and whatnot, and you can look at you can look at and sign up and find out more about it. I'm going to skip over this a bit, just to get to just what was some of the work that Kathy wanted me to present. This is just about non-linear storytelling and different ways of how interaction design works with non-linear storytelling and interactive documentaries. You can ask me questions about this if you want later. What I'll talk to you about is more some of the artwork that I do, and what the thing about the artwork that I do, what I'm really interested in is how to get an audience members to participate in my artwork in terms of making and adding content to the artwork itself. So what I do is I create pieces of, I create a structure that is an artwork, and what has to happen is that the audience member has to interact with that. So that's the interaction design, what I have to understand about what will get the audience member to interact with that. So in terms of what this means, I'll show you a video. This is a project that was done with Emma Hendricks. It's called Don't Stop, and it is actually a bunch of little boxes that you can hold in your hand, and you can record a loop into them. There's an electronic chip in there, and you can record a loop into it and then put it into a central podium or connect it to a sound system. So this is usually done in a gallery setting, which means that people have to come together and record themselves into the boxes and create basically a beatbox situation. So I will just show you. I'm going to skip ahead. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do, do, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do, do, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do, do, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do, do, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do, do, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you get the idea. What happens is that when you get into a gallery setting, people come together and they all start mixing their voices together. And sometimes it becomes quite performative. When this was done for Nuit Blanche, Winnipeg, there was a group of opera singers. They had a show going on in the city, so they all came together and they did a whole opera through the boxes, through the looping of the boxes. It can become political, where people start actually doing different things, talking about different things on different boxes, and it's, yeah, it can get interesting. So in terms of that project itself became very popular and received a lot of attention from different places across the world. And so we went to the BC Arts Council and said, hey, can we make this into an iPhone app? So you can actually do the same thing with like what you would do, but on an iPhone. So each one of these little boxes is similar to a little box in your hand. This is, this is the one thing about technology, is that when you do technological work, and this kind of work is, you're constantly chasing after the technological beast. So you can still, like in terms of keeping things updated and whatnot, so you can still, if you have an older operating system, you can still use this on your iPhone. And we are currently upgrading it, working with the programming to currently upgrade it so that it will continue working into the future. Self-funded, of course, but I'll show you a little bit of what that. So through this, you can do the same things that you do with the boxes, except the additional thing that you can do is you can take your sound and you can upload it. So there's a... So there's basically a database of sounds that other people have created across the world. It's nothing, none of the sounds have, and a lot of what I do too in terms of this type of artwork is I don't actually put any ownership to the content that's being created. It's really important that when you create in this environment that people don't have to get caught up in ownership. It's just in the moment of doing what you're doing. So you can upload your little file, but you can't put your name to it or anything. Well, you could type in your name, but it eventually disappears into the ether as more people put stuff up. And then you can download, obviously, the stuff that other people have put together. So in terms of this continues this type of practice that I do. And so and when I talk about interaction design, it doesn't even have to be technical in some ways. I created a project. I was just really interested in how people put content into systems and how other people can work off of it without any kind of agenda. So I created this project called Permanent Change, where I created business cards, and I had a voicemail box that I got from TELUS, which is the telephone system in BC. And I threw these cards out all over the city, and you could basically phone the number and change the message. That you could change the message, you could add a message on, or you could re-record the greeting. So you could do both of them. So some people would come up with a new greeting and say, hey, leave a message, and other people would just leave messages based on what the greeting was about. It all became very messed up. So people would tell stories. Some, like my favorite one was this guy who phoned in and read his resignation letter to Starbucks because he was really mad, and then another person phoned in and said, hey dude, I hope you're having a good time with now that you're finally not working for Starbucks. You know, it was like that kind of content, which is very silly obviously, but it feels good, right? It feels good as an audience member and audience to be able to create. So based on that, and I'll finish up very shortly, this is called permanent deviation. I couldn't get the URL permanent change, so I renamed this permanent deviation. And this is basically a project where it's the exact same thing as the voicemail, except it's for programmers. So programmers, there's something called processing, which is a visual programming language where you can use code to generate images. And so what I did is I worked with a programmer who would, let's see. I worked with a programmer that would create this interface. I'm just going to show it to you because it's too hard to explain in such a short period of time. So this is the website, Permanent Deviation. You can go in and decide to be a coder. Right now I've just clicked on, you're watching a replay of people coding in the past. And so what happens here is that anyone can go into this website and they can add code to this pane. But they have to work on the last person's piece of code. And they only have 3 minutes to do so, which is, you know, it's a lot of pressure. So in terms of content and changing the content, I mean, obviously this is made specifically for people that are interested in coding and whatnot. But they are essentially changing the content each time and creating their own new artwork. So right now, you can't actually see what's going on here because it takes time to walk through this. But I will go back and show you some of the other stuff that gets created out of it. So those are some of the things that processing creates. And then, so I'll just sum up just to say that one of the reasons why I do this and why I think it's important for audiences to create, be creative or try to be creative, or where as my artwork creates this environment for them to create agency for themselves, is for me, it's very important. I think people become more active, politically active, socially active, if they think that they can create again. So there's a lot of people that don't stop drawing at the age of 10, and there's a lot of people that do not think that they can do anything of worth that's creative. And I think that once you start doing art projects, or once you start thinking that you can draw again or program, anyone can actually go in here. It's quite simple to change a few things, and you can't really screw it up that much. And once you start realizing that you can do this, I think you can become more active in your own communities, because you're not just doing everything that someone's telling you to do from a day-to-day job perspective, et cetera, et cetera. So there you go. No, not really. I think it's a very personal experience, and I think it's very hard. I think it's very hard for people to be creative, and I think that it's hard to describe what they went through. And so I don't actually give them feedback. I mean, that's an interesting, I don't actually leave them space to give me feedback, but it would be interesting to know. I do see in the gallery space, like the don't stop stuff, like you see people going in and working together, and that's the other part of it too, is that once you realize you can do something creative together, it's also an eye-opener, like for a person to think that they can do more themselves. Anything else? Yeah. Yeah, and so they do, and this one's actually hard to get people to interact with because they have to be programmers, and it's a very specific thing. Like they don't have to be, but it scares people, you know. But this kind of thing is what I mean by interaction design is that like how the feedback to me is that I don't have to explain anything to them. So that's what I mean by interaction design. If I've done all of those things, if I understand their sociology, I understand their perspective, then they'll just go into the room and they'll just start doing something. That's it. Thank you.